In this video, what we're going to do is just have a look at a few of the various lighting techniques that we've got in 3D Studio Max. Now, previously we just had a look at the overview of what is direct lighting and what is indirect lighting. But what I want to do here is just discuss some of the different techniques that are used and go into a little bit more depth about the kind of look and feel that you can get, and also just have a little bit of a chat about which one you would pick for certain situations. Okay, so we're really talking about lighting strategies here. So the image that we've got in front of us is a commercial image which I produced for a client a couple of years ago now, and it's been finished in Photoshop, but the original render was done using 3D Studio Max's daylight system. Now the daylight system is a very impressive piece of kit. What it does is, as it sounds like, it simulates daylight, but it does so with a mixture of techniques. It does so with a mixture of what's called dome lighting and with a mixture of direct lighting. And it's sort of a hybrid between the two. You can use global illumination with it, as I have done in this case. So what I find for outdoor renders that you want to look really nice, really real, this type of lighting is very useful. This image was created solely with global illumination. It's an interior scene, and in order to get it to look absolutely as fabulous as it does, I was using global illumination so that each one of the photons of the light would bounce around the room and would create this kind of effect that you get in front of you here, which is, it's very well lit, it's very bright, it looks very sterile and clinical, and really I like the look of this piece. It's quite cutesy. So that was global illumination that I used with that, where the lights were producing photons and the photons were bouncing around the scene. This particular scene was actually done using direct lighting. You can tell that because we've got the main area of light that's coming through here is coming through very much in a straight line, and there isn't much sort of fill light coming in here. There isn't much light that's really sort of bouncing around, and I'd expect to see more light bouncing onto that wall, especially if they've got such a bright light coming in here. You wouldn't expect to see so much of a contrast like that in real life. So it's definitely very much a direct lighting image. However, I think what this does is it also highlights, sort of what you can achieve with direct lighting, really. I mean, it's quite a nice image. I know it's sort of several years old now. For me, it's several years old. But really, it gives a nice sort of look and feel, and just shows you, as I say, what you can achieve with direct lighting. Now, although this is an interior scene, what you'll find if you were to look at this actual scene is, from the camera point of view, where we're standing and where we're looking at this scene, there isn't actually any geometry. And neither is there any geometry if we were to look around the corner where this grating is. So, bear that one in mind as well. This particular image is done solely using a dome light. Now, a dome light can actually be used just as a direct light, or it can be also used as a global illumination light. So it's kind of a hybrid between the two, and this is also what gets used in the daylight system. In this instance, what we've done is we're just using it as a direct lighting source. Now, a dome light is, as it sounds, it is a dome that's pretty invisible. It sits over your scene. We'll talk about it a little bit later. In 3D Studio Max, they call them skylights. We will be going into detail with that in a little bit, next section. But you can tell that this has been used as a direct light, dome light, because what we've got here is some very dark areas of shadow that wouldn't necessarily be dark areas in a full-blown render. When I say a full-blown render, I mean one where we will be using global illumination. With global illumination, these areas which are slightly darker here would actually be lighter, and there wouldn't be such a harsh edge of shadow between dark and light there, as we can see here. So it's pretty obvious what can be achieved with that. It's a reasonable quality, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's fairly good. It's a little bit quicker in time than making a global illumination render, but still looks pretty good, still like it. And what we've got here, this is something called high dynamic range lighting. Now, this is where we use a image, also known as image-based lighting, obvious reasons. And the high dynamic range image is actually a 24-bit image that has 8 extra bits of luminosity data per pixel. And from that, we can then derive where the light will be coming from. Okay, so with this, it's actually a mix of high dynamic range lighting and a direct light source, which is giving us this very harsh shadow. But we know that this is a high dynamic range image because the light, the area just over to this side of the van, which looks lighter, is where the sun is coming from. But we've also got this very, very beautiful sort of fill light going on here, this bounce light happening in this direction, or this side of the van. And what's great about it as well is that it matches the sky and it matches the rest of the environment that this van is in. So we're really looking there at something that's a little bit more advanced, but it's really rather quite cool. I'd use this if I had a piece of CG that I wanted to put over the top of a live action plate or a photograph. And I'd probably want to try and take a high dynamic range image at the time when I was, when I was taking my photograph that I was going to put 3D over, and that would help me sort of match the lighting conditions. And that's really what high dynamic range lighting is all about. Giving that high-end feel and look that sort of you can't tell whether it's a real piece of camper van here or whether it's a CG camper van. So what we've done here is we've just briefly sort of gone through and had a look at several different lighting ideas, and we've just talked about the strategies that we would employ. For something like this where I'm putting CG over a live plate, I'd want to use a high dynamic range image so I could match my lighting to the background. In this instance, I just wanted a very quick sort of bit of lighting that was going to give me shadows and an even lighting effect, so I used a dome light. Here I used a direct light because it was cheap, it was simple, it was quick, and it gave me a great look and feel. In this instance, I used solely global illumination, where these areas here, which were materials, actually emitted light, and that's bouncing around the scene and it's flying around and it's sort of decaying over time. But what you're seeing here is a really nice, evenly lit scene, appearing to be lit from these light sources up here. And here what we've got is a final piece that was done using the daylight system. This was an exterior render, and I would probably, for exterior architectural renders, always use a daylight system. So with that said, we're going to end this tutorial and we're going to move on to looking at each one of those specific lighting techniques in detail.